Hi, I'm Beth. I am a tester at Skybet and work with Luke. You can find me at Eccentric Tester and Ramblings of a Mad Woman on WordPress, which I put some weird blogs every now and then. I'm not very consistent, I apologise for that, but this one will be going up if you want to read this later on. My pronouns are she, they, just for reference. So my first job was a test consultant, which is just a glorified contractor with less pay. And I'm now a test engineer. I am super interested in mobile testing, performance testing and agile testing processes, hence this talk. If you want to chat to me about that, go for it. If you don't want to talk to me about tech, I really like board games, heavy metal and food, mainly cake. So ask me for some really cool recipes. I promise I'm more interesting. So if I'm going too fast, I'm sorry, I'll probably slow down a bit. I haven't actually rehearsed this. I wrote it this morning. So we are covering common traps and work silos, how to climb out of the big hole that is the silo, so what can you do as a dev, what can you do as a tester, and what can you do, sorry, am I not being loud enough? And like, can DevOps actually play a role in smashing a silo? And then the bonus round, which you're probably all going to grimace at, is should testers be technical? So if you're a tester, I'm sorry, you probably have this argument on a daily basis. So first thing, it's a trap. What are you falling into? So deja vu for testers, doing silos and working through agile processes when you decide to finally become fragile isn't any different for a tester. So coming from my perspective, it's just a mini waterfall over and over and over again where you just throw things at the tester at the end. So that's basically what a silo is to me. I just get chucked all of the dev's work and I don't really get to see what's going on at the beginning. So it just feels like you've not really transitioned into an agile working process. So I will be going through that. What's Tom actually working on? So if you're in a silo, do you really know what the rest of your teammates are doing? I'm sorry, Tom, there's 3 of them. And why was this decision made? So what the hell have you been working on? What was your trade-off for making that decision? Did the business throw something at you? Or also known as when I get stuff chucked at me to test, is what the hell? Because I've never seen it before. And shit piling workloads. Not a really creative term, I couldn't think of anything better. Thanks for the photo. Do you want me to bring
I'm not taking it.
Are we confident that our output is up to standard? And the classic Not My Duck. If you've not heard of that, I will go through it. So has anyone heard of Not My Duck? Okay. At least I got some shakes of heads just stared at me. First thing, deja vu. So teams trying to be more agile, don't really get there. Teams ignoring that silos aren't actually agile, just throwing stuff over a wall, into another cup, whatever you want to use your analogy. I've got some really cool pictures later on. Tests being forgotten about, so I will get onto a test first approach, which I don't think everyone likes. I'm getting some stares right now. And overworking is agile, but your team is now a mini waterfall. So you're just doing your stamp of approval on business, stamp of approval on dev, and then you're just throwing it to test and then at the customer, but is it really an agile working process? And then this is the normal response when you've got a silo is, agile, why aren't you working? Which is quite sad. What's Tom working on? Communication. This probably goes down the window when you're working in a silo with your stamp of approval. So just chuck it. I used to fish. Just throwing it from person to person, just moving it down the line. Why was this decision made? So were decisions made without everyone involved? Are you having meetings with everyone? Does your 3 amigos have a tester, a dev, business? Because normally when you say you want to be agile and you have a silo, you just kind of go, oh, well, we've got our business analyst here, so we'll just do it anyway. Management decisions rolling down the hill. I'm sure you've all had that moment where everyone's just kind of gone, okay, this is our roadmap, this is what we're working on now, end of discussion. It's a bit shit. Yeah, it's kind of an analogy. It's just like, if you can go and work on that magic, that'd be great. And then someone's gone rogue. This is normally where you've got a dev that doesn't really want to engage in your processes that you're trying to implement, and they just kind of go off and work on their own. So I'm sure everyone's got one of those. They just kind of sit in the corner, look a little bit scary. Shit piling workloads. So for starters, please don't do this. This is normally where you get a big backlog and bottleneck at a point of work, and then the next person onto it just can't take it and they just end up with a mountain. So, take from the right. I don't think that's big enough. Can everyone see that? No, I'm sorry. I thought that was massive on my screen. So basically I've just kind of represented this with a Kanban board. If you started to bottleneck and you start piling on other people, maybe move along a bit, have a look at what's going on, try and assess the differences instead of just going, oh, I'm doing my job, it's all fine. Are we confident if the output is up to standard? Just kind of emphasise this with communication, communication, communication. So are you just going, okay, I've done my bit, I've communicated what I'm doing, but what is everyone else doing? Have you listened to them? Do you actually know what other people are doing in your team? And then not my duck. So not my duck is basically not my problem. You go off, you say, I don't care about this thing, doesn't really matter, I've done my part. So I'm not going to test, I'm not going to do some dev work, I'm not going to get involved in the business process, it's not my issue. Yeah, so who is actually responsible? I hope you all agree when I say everyone in a business process. If you're working from all the way from end to end, everyone's responsible for the work that's put out, regardless of whether it's dev, test, business, customer feedback, anything. Everyone is responsible for actually being involved in the work. And then I've kind of just like put a side thing in here of what is a bus quota. So if somebody got kicked in front of a bus, or as my manager decided this was a bit too morbid, so he called it the lottery quota. So if you won the lottery and somebody disappeared from your team, what are you going to do? So the quote would be, I've got 4 devs and one of them wins the lottery, you've got 3 people to pick it up. But if you've got 4 devs and 1 tester and you're in a silo, you've got no tester. If that tester disappears, you can't pick up their work. What are you going to do about it? So I always keep that in mind of, if you're sharing work and you're not in a silo, this isn't a problem. But if you are, then you're probably going to panic if your tester goes on holiday for a little bit, because this is only one of them. It's a bit scary when they disappear for 2 weeks. Next question, which is kind of like, I'm probably going to feel like I'm insulting you a little bit now thinking back on this slide. Yeah, you are in a hole. If you're in a silo, you're definitely in a hole, but there is good news. You can get out of it. So you might be at various points on the ladder getting out of a hole, but at some point in your work career, you're probably working in a silo at some point right now, which isn't great. It doesn't always have to be in your day-to-day, but you're probably doing something. So what can we actually do to fix this? I'll get onto the nicer stuff now, instead of just being mean. As a dev, I can learn about testing. So the whole take everything from the right, if there's bottlenecks at test, maybe you might want to get involved in doing some testing. I'm not saying quit being a dev and start being a tester, just every now and then if your tester's freaking out because there's 60 things out there, just help them out and do a task. Dev to dev pairing, which probably I'm hoping you all do, it's just a peer review sort of thing. But that kind of goes hand in hand with dev test pairing. And that isn't just, is your tester sat there at an early stage working with you, it's, are you testing with them, do you want to work on testing with them? So moving further down the line rather than a tester accommodating a dev's needs. Sound like a fun plan? Does anyone want to implement that one yet? That's a definite no. Please do. As a tester, I'd really appreciate it, because if I'm just sat there accommodating you, sat in the front while you're coding, learning about what you need, I feel a bit neglected. So swap around every now and then. Communicate your concerns. So if there's a particularly tricky piece of work happening, don't just sit there with the tester and go, oh, this bit needs looking at, this thing needs looking at. Like, sit with them, go through it, demonstrate it, test on your machine rather than a tester's, which, how many people actually test on the dev's machine, or your machine, or with a dev? Anyone? This is an interactive piece of, yeah. I feel so valued right now. But if you test on your machine, you can kind of show what's wrong, because you've probably heard or said, well, it was working when I did it. It can eliminate that, which, it was working when I did it, feels very silo to me, and it was like, it's not my problem, you go deal with it. Test it on yours, show how it's working, show what you've done differently to a tester, or your other dev, or whoever's coming with you. You can at least like eliminate some of that problem of like, this is what I'm concerned about, this is why it's not doing this thing. And then mob testing. So we did this today and I skipped out on it because I was a bit busy. Mob testing is where you spend an hour, like a time box piece of work, where everyone in your team sits there and focuses on testing, looking at the product. You might call it swarm testing. Can't think of any other words. But yeah, swarm, mob testing, everyone kind of works on it. You drop all your dev work, you go and you sit there and you do some exploratory testing. Just play around with the machine, see what happens. Because you might spot something that tester hasn't, which is quite nice because you've got a completely different perspective to me. So it's quite nice when you find a bug that I didn't. It's also a little bit embarrassing, so you get to show the testers up. So win-win for you. Yeah, so as a tester, I can, if there's any testers here apart from me, this is what I try and promise to do for my devs. Learn about programming. So I did write JavaScript last week and it scared the hell out of me. Probably won't do it again for a month. Just learn, if you're a tester, maybe be more technical. Learn what's actually happening, understand what the functions are, what stuff's doing, instead of just sitting there going, well, I kind of understand what you're doing at the front end, I'll just click a few buttons. Actually know what's going on. Emphasize a test first approach. So this is going to sound really cheesy, I ran a not tester in 90 minutes course that I stole from a colleague to try and get my devs to do a bit more testing. So I made them sit there for a full hour and a half and listen to me. You only get half an hour, so feel bad about that. Where I made them go through a list of activities that one of the guys at work had written, just to kind of get into the mindset of what I'm doing, so they can at least understand things from my perspective, which is quite nice, because when I'm start doing stuff from theirs, it's just nice to share ideas rather than just going, okay, I'll do it now. So sharing the work around, unit testing, that sort of thing, get testers involved, just kind of emphasise that and work on it together. Understanding all aspects of testing. So what are unit tests? I'm guilty of this one. I don't always pay attention and I've just kind of let that one slide. But I did sit with Tom while he was writing some today and asked him what he was doing. So that was nice. Still have no idea what he was doing, but I was there. So I definitely need to work on that one personally. But if you're a tester, you should at least be invested in what is happening that you're not really in control of. Dev test pairing, I'm really just making a point now, just work together. Just emphasising that even if it is writing a code with a dev sat there, which I've done in the past, it's interesting, but I've definitely understood more about what they were doing that day. And listen and act upon the concerns of a dev. So even if you're not pairing or you are pairing, if a dev says, oh, I'm really not sure about how this is going to behave, pay attention. Don't just go off and go, oh, I'll do my usual stuff. Just actually act on it, think about what they've said, think about what it's going to impact and the other areas that you might actually be concerned about, because you might miss something. And trust your developers to test. I put this in bold because I'm really, really guilty of this. If some of the devs in my team, I'm sorry, stop looking at me. So I work with Tom and he's just pulling faces right now. I have a really bad habit of when the devs are going, oh, I'll pick up that ticket because you've got like 4 things sat there. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. And I'm aware that's a really, really bad way to approach stuff because they're not incompetent. They've wrote their code. They've shared their work. They know what they're doing. They know your job. Hopefully. And you might know a bit more by the end of this if you act on it. Trust people. I think that's a really key point because if you're siloing, you don't really know what you're doing. You don't really trust each other to do it, which is why you get really kind of hoardy over your work and it's mine, and it's just turned into a silo of dev does this, tester does this, my work. Share it a little bit. I'm really bad at it. Working on it, but I'd really recommend just trusting people. DevOps. I kind of went into a bit boring of this is what a DevOps is, if everyone's probably not heard of the official DevOps role. So just to get dedicated cross-functionality. Doesn't really differentiate between the roles of what devs and testers do. You've probably heard the magical unicorn that does everything. It's not really a DevOps, but it can actually help with siloing. So there are 3 main areas. There's your weird sysadmin guy that does all the backend stuff. Sorry if you're the weird sysadmin guy. Site reliability engineer, which nobody really knows what they do. They work with load test performers and magic happens. And then your unicorn, which is the person who you think is a dev and a tester, and they just seem to magically get all this work done. But what are they actually doing? Are you burning them out? Are you giving them too much to do? So, shared responsibility, is it a good idea, or is it actually a burden on the person that's doing that? So I'm not going to give you the answer to this one. This is more of a go away and think about it, because quite a lot of companies have started to bring in DevOps without really thinking about what they want from DevOps. Got a few nods. Good. Not being controversial. So yeah, are you just putting it all on this magical person that you think is going to fix everything? We'll move further away.
Closer to the mic.
Yeah. Sorry?
Or just this side with the mic.
Yeah. Do you want me to go that way?
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Mix it up.
Now I've got to turn my head again. Now we've got to a bonus round and I forgot my post-it notes, so I'm just going to make you all shout at me instead, and I'm really sorry about the mic. This is me speaking at full volume as well, which is slightly embarrassing. Should testers be technical? So, interactive. You don't all have to put your hands up and scream at once, but it would be appreciated if somebody said something, because otherwise it's just embarrassing for me.
No.
What do you define as technical for a tester?
Well, what do you define as tester?
Good point. It's the point of this exercise.
That's what my element was.
Yeah. Anyone? I will go over what I
Writing
think.
some sort of automated test.
So, automation.
Understanding what the tests do.
Yeah. So, test scope. I will repeat that if it's not being picked up. So, automation, test scope, test work. I'm assuming you mean test strategy and plans by that. Yeah. Anything else?
Understanding about the browser itself, if it's going through a browser, for instance.
Yeah.
Identifying the technical boundaries of what is delivering value to the end user.
So, delivering value to customers.
Yeah, but like the more technical side, like, you know, for instance, if you're having to prove that, I don't know, this new UI element works and stuff like that, yeah, you might want to automate the browser to make sure that it's actually going to work cross-platform, but if the value comes from, I don't know, load testing a server for whatever reason, then you need to pick up that skill as well.
Half agree with that, but I'll get on to it. I just wanted to see what everyone else thought. How do you feel about nothing? I'll move on to the next one then. So we've got automation, the more technical side, writing code, that kind of thing. Seems to be the most common response at the moment out of the three people. Next one, pros of testers being technical. I know everyone has opinions on.
We're not going to go back to the dev asking irrelevant questions.
What do you define as an irrelevant question?
Why do they do that? What's that for? Something like that.
Okay. What I mean by tester?
Yeah.
So what I mean by a tester is someone who, we'll call them a glorified checker for the purposes of this activity. So someone who goes away with dev's work and makes sure that it's doing what it should be. But everyone has a different definition of what a tester is, and every company has a different definition of what a tester should be doing.
But then don't you have to define the test so it's pretty clear?
So it depends entirely on what the system needs. So for my companies that I've worked for in the past, some of them want really, really strict traditional testers that will write out every single step of the test case, and the place that I'm working now doesn't want any of that. They want you to be basically an exploratory expert with some automation thrown in there. So it massively varies depending on the company, which is why I didn't want to define what a tester was, because they mean very different things to all of you based on what your company wants right now. Hope that answers the question. No.
Well, I mean, I'm still confused though, because when you're talking about testing, are you talking about testing code,
Yeah.
which is what unit testing type stuff is?
Okay.
Yeah. Or are you talking about testing the results of the code, which is what the user does? client will experience with the software.
So there's like,
Which are they're two
Yeah.
completely different.
they're two very different areas, and the area which the end user completely experiences has like 4 different parts in it. It's how easy is it to use, how does it actually look aesthetically, is it intuitive, which ties into the aesthetics but isn't just, does it look nice, can I actually find this button, and then does it actually work on phones, this, that, the other, which kind of crosses all the areas of mobile testing, which is why we've got like niche areas, automation, which is it's just a tool to make life easier, it's not to actually replace a tester. So there's like very, very niche parts of it that all have very different things.
Which is all those 4
Yeah.
things are very different to
Unit testing,
which is why I was asking for the clarification.
unit tests are very, very specific to one piece of code that a dev would work on, which isn't normally what a tester would work on, unless they really want to get involved in it, which I've learned today working with Tom. I really don't. Yeah.
What about if the code changes so much that the unit test becomes outdated?
Then that's what the test first approach is for. So using things like test driven development would help with that. So addressing things like what a unit test does. If you completely change a system, then you need to make sure that your unit tests are now related to what you've actually changed it to. So it's always making sure that you're integrating and updating. So that's what tech debt's for basically, or at least it is where I am. So going back, refactoring, looking at what you do and making sure it's up to date, making sure you're covering everything that you have actually changed. But normally in our team, we don't put a ticket out unless it's actually had a unit test written for it, whether it's a new piece of code or like a bug fix. Move on to the next one. Might not do this interactive thing because it's the first time I'm giving this talk and it's not gone very well. Normally when I do talks, they're for testers and they just kind of want to shout out answers. Cons of being technical. So a downside to a tester actually being technical. You might not be able to think of any.
They're asked to become a developer. That they sort of like, they're like, oh, you do so much dev work now.
You go off and be a dev.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you're too closely tied to the code base, you kind of almost get a bias that you can't necessarily kind of check it
Yeah.
properly.
That was the one I was kind of hoping someone would shout out. You get too fixated on dev work and what the code's doing that you completely miss it. So you think you're going to do, I can't actually see with these glasses. You think kind of that you know what you're doing and you get so like settled into your actual job that you just completely forget about going outside the box. Which kind of brings me on to what I think a technical tester does, which is probably the controversial bit that you might all get annoyed at. Yeah, understanding the architecture and the product. So I kind of view testers as being the bridge between all of the parts of the business. So you're talking to solutions architects, you're talking to BAs, product managers and devs. So it's more understanding every part of it and how that works rather than just going, I click buttons, because then you're basically a monkey. Being able to troubleshoot, which kind of ties into the pros of testers, like understanding how it works and not asking irrelevant questions, is this isn't working, why isn't it working, rather than just throwing it back at the dev. So you're actually asking the questions and going, okay, I've narrowed it down to this thing, here's what needs fixing or the area that I think you should look at. Being able to check logs, understand where things are located, and system feeds. So this is kind of a big frustration for me, is when system logs are just running in the background and someone goes, oh, well, where do I find that? And they've worked there for 1.5 years. That's kind of embarrassing as a tester when you just sat there. So actually being able to go, oh, this is an error log, this is where this is why it does it, to feed back into your dev. Because I don't really think you're doing your job as a tester if you can't tell your dev what's actually going on with the system. So even just a basic thing like that is technical as far as quite a few testers are concerned. So if they don't know, please be forgiving with them, because they might not have the same background and experience as you do. Well, they definitely don't, but be a bit gentle. So reviewing their side of the code, so SQL, I tend to write quite a lot of like the config of the system, so set up whether things are feature toggled on and off, so whether you're hiding it from the customer in front end, performance, mobile and automation, kind of only if they're specialised in that area. So feel free to ask me about performance and mobile testing, but if anyone asks me any automation questions, I'm going to run really quickly because I have no idea. So for me, being technical isn't just being an automation tester, it's understanding how it works, but not actually physically being able to do that job. And then, not an automation specialist. Should have brought that up as I was making that last point. So if you haven't specialised in the area, like performance, I wouldn't expect someone to go running off with Gatlin, load runner, JMeter, that sort of thing, and getting things to work. Yeah, just kind of taking it at their own pace and understanding how things work. And I'm losing my voice. This probably isn't picking up very well anymore. Yeah, I think that's everything.